I crossed no man's land at night with orders I knew would kill me. Just like before, this story will be delivered in multiple consecutive parts, each part around 2,500-2,000 words, so we can build full psychological immersion, WW1 Psalm authenticity, and first-person depth toward 10,000 plus words. Here is part 1 of story 3. The mud swallowed me almost immediately. I had expected it, feared it, and yet nothing could have prepared me for the sensation of being trapped between the trenches, pressed into the churned earth of no man's land. The night was black, unbroken except for distant flares, the occasional flash of an artillery shell cutting across the sky. I could hear the river of rain, the drip of water from shattered timbers, the low rumble of guns that spoke of death somewhere beyond. I checked my rifle, loaded, safety off, a shallow breath, step. The mud sucked at my boots, my legs heavy, cold, burning from the effort to pull them free. Every movement was slow, deliberate. The order I carried weighed heavier than the pack on my back. Command had demanded I deliver it, and I knew it would mean death, not just for me, but for those waiting for the message I carried. I remembered the men in my trench, faces blurred, names gone. We had joked, cursed, whispered promises we could not keep. Now all was lost to the mud and the darkness. One man had been beside me in the trench when the order arrived. His eyes met mine, silent, understanding. The expectation was clear. Deliver, survive if you can, or die trying. I moved carefully, hand pressed against the rifle, body low. Mud squelched between my fingers as I tested the earth before placing my foot. Every inch was a negotiation with gravity, with the sucking soil, with fate itself. The sky above roared with distant artillery. Each shell that fell in the distance shook the ground beneath me. I tried not to imagine it landing closer, tried not to imagine the weight of my own body pressed into the mud, gone. I passed the first crater. Moonlight reflected off the stagnant water inside. I imagined the men who had died here, their bodies tangled with barbed wire, dragged down by the mud just like me. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The rhythm kept me alive. A flare burst overhead. I froze. The white light illuminated the field, desolate, cratered, twisted by shell fire. Barbed wire stretched like skeletal fingers. Dead trees, splintered and blackened, leaned into the sky. The wind carried the smell of gunpowder, blood, and wet earth. I pressed myself into a crater, huddling as if the mud itself could hide me from the world. I thought of home, not clearly, just fragments. The smell of bread baking, the laughter of children in the streets, the feel of sun on my shoulders. Those memories were distant, fleeting, impossible to hold. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The next movement was survival. Nothing else mattered. The letters I carried in my breast pocket were heavy. They contained orders, instructions, and the kind of cold, precise words that stripped life of meaning. Obey, survive if possible. The message was urgent, but I knew it was also pointless. Delivering it could save nothing. Command valued orders more than lives. I could feel that truth with every step, every shudder of the mud beneath me, every crack of distant fire. A rat scuttled across the crater. I froze, rifle raised, heart hammering. It was nothing, yet everything, the presence of life, of motion, in a place so dominated by death. I swallowed and pressed forward. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Hours, or was it minutes, passed. Time had no purchase here. Each movement was a battle, each breath a small victory. Hunger had become a dull ache. Cold gnawed at my fingers, toes, and nose. Fatigue pressed into my shoulders and back. Yet I moved forward. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I passed a shell hole filled with water. I peered into it, seeing reflections distorted by ripples, imagining the dead staring back. I swallowed, swallowed again, and forced my gaze ahead. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The order in my pocket burned against my chest, heavier than the rifle, heavier than the mud. I remembered the last words of my comrade before I left the trench. "Come back," he had said, a promise, or perhaps a curse. I did not know if I would. I did not know if I wanted to. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Each movement forward was a negotiation with that uncertainty, with the mud, with death itself. Another flare. The field was revealed in stark detail. Craters, barbed wire, fallen men, shattered trees. I hugged the earth, moving from shadow to shadow. Every step could be my last. Every sound, distant or near, made me flinch. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Survival was immediate. No thought of tomorrow mattered. I stumbled over something. A body? A log? I could not tell. Mud stuck to my hands as I pushed off, feeling the cold seep deeper. I pressed onward. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Each rhythm sustained me. Each breath claimed life, however fragile. I reached another trench line, shattered and half collapsed. I paused, pressing my chest to the earth, looking for movement. None. The silence was oppressive. Yet I had to move. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The order was in my pocket. Obedience demanded action. Survival demanded caution. I thought of the men waiting for the message. Were they alive? Did it matter? Command cared about the order more than their lives, more than mine. I could feel that truth cutting into me, sharper than any shell fragment. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The mud continued to swallow me, slow, relentless, indifferent. Every movement required negotiation, calculation, precision. I could not risk panicking. Panic meant death. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The rhythm, the heartbeat of survival, carried me forward. I remembered her face, faint, almost a hallucination. I wondered if she had waited, if she had imagined me crossing fields of mud and fire, carrying orders that could kill. Perhaps I had already been left behind in her mind, the way my comrades had been left behind in the mud. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. A distant gun crack made me flinch. A shell burst. I pressed myself deeper into a crater, mud sucking at my boots, my legs. I held the rifle closer, feeling its weight anchor me. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Each breath was victory. Each movement a claim to life in a world that had abandoned meaning. The mud seemed to have a life of its own, pulling at my boots, clinging to my uniform, filling the gaps between my fingers with cold and weight. Every step was laborious, as if the earth itself wanted to claim me. I moved slowly, deliberately, hand on my rifle, senses stretched taut. A flare burst overhead, and for a brief moment, the world was revealed in stark clarity. Craters filled with water, tangled barbed wire, the shapes of men long gone, frozen mid-motion. I swallowed bile and forced my gaze forward. I remembered the orders again, the cold precision of command. Deliver, survive if you can. I knew what survival meant. It was not bravery, it was not honor. It was the absence of death, nothing more. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears, every heartbeat a warning, every breath a fragile claim to existence. A rat scuttled across the crater, eyes gleaming in the faint light. I froze, rifle up, willing it to vanish. It did. My chest ached from the sudden adrenaline, my hands trembling. I whispered aloud, trying to anchor myself. It's nothing. Nothing is moving. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Words had become talismans against the void. I passed a shell hole filled with stagnant water. Leaning over, I glimpsed my reflection, distorted by ripples and mud. My face was pale, streaked with grime. My eyes were hollow. The letters pressed into my chest felt heavier than ever, each word a reminder of a world that no longer existed. I wondered if anyone would ever read them, if anyone would remember that I had existed at all. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The wind howled, carrying the smell of gunpowder, wet earth, and death. I imagined the sniper somewhere, patient, waiting, calculating. I no longer thought of him as a man. He was inevitability, the embodiment of the risk that clung to every inch of no man's land. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Hunger gnawed at me. Cold bit, exhaustion pressed into my joints. My boots squelched with every step, mud pulling at my heels. I stumbled over debris, a log, a body, something unidentifiable. I pressed onward, forcing my legs to obey. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Survival had reduced itself to repetition, to rhythm, to motion. I thought of my comrades, scattered across the trenches, dead or lost or retreating. The weight of command's indifference pressed on me. The order in my pocket could save nothing. It was a thread dangling over the edge of a chasm, waiting to snap. Yet I carried it, because obedience was all I had left. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. A flare illuminated a barbed wire maze ahead. I paused, pressed into the mud, shivering. I could see the frozen shapes of bodies caught in the wire. I swallowed hard. Each step forward risked entanglement, exposure, death. Yet I moved, careful, deliberate, calculating. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I remembered her face, soft, distant, almost unreal. I wondered if she had imagined me, alone in this field, carrying a message that could only destroy. I felt rage, despair, longing, but none of it mattered. Only the rhythm mattered. Only survival mattered. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. A distant artillery shell struck. The ground shuddered beneath me. Mud sprayed, water spilled, debris shook. My heart jumped into my throat. I pressed myself into a crater, rifle across my chest, and waited. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The hours blurred. I lost count of time, of distance, of steps. I existed only in immediate sensation, mud pulling at me, cold biting, hunger gnawing, rifle heavy in my hands. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The letters pressed against my chest, a weight I could not shed. A shadow moved, or perhaps it was the illusion of exhaustion and fear. I raised my rifle, aiming, heart hammering. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I whispered aloud, I am alive, I am alive. The words were a tether to reality, however fragile. The field stretched endlessly. Craters gaped like mouths ready to swallow. Barbed wire reached like skeletal fingers. I paused at each obstacle, testing the mud, the ground, my own strength. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Each small movement was a victory. Each breath, a claim to life. By the third night, hallucinations had begun. I thought I saw figures moving just beyond the crater edges. Men in my unit, ghosts of comrades, or illusions born of exhaustion. I argued with them, pleaded, cursed. My own voice echoed across the silent, shattered landscape. I clung to the rhythm. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. It was all that kept me tethered to life. I stumbled into another crater, mud up to my knees. I paused, pressing my chest to the earth, listening. Silence except for distant artillery, distant cries, wind. I whispered her name. Nothing. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I forced myself forward. The letters burned against my chest. I remembered the words, instructions, orders, urgencies, all meaningless now. Delivering them could save nothing, yet I carried them, as if the act alone justified existence. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. A sudden crack, sniper fire. I dropped flat into the mud, heart hammering, lungs screaming. The bullet struck behind me, shattering mud and earth. I pressed myself deeper into the frozen soil, trembling. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I whispered, I will survive. But even saying it felt hollow. Hours passed, or perhaps days. I could no longer tell. The field, the mud, the wire, the craters had become a maze of torment and habit. I existed only in movement, in breath, in rhythm. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The mud never stopped. It was everywhere, pressing into my boots, my hands, my uniform, filling every crevice of my body with cold and resistance. Each step was a negotiation. Every breath a claim against oblivion. I could hear the faint whisper of the wind, the distant crack of artillery, the dull groans of men somewhere, alive or dead I could not know. I moved cautiously toward the next crater, each step deliberate, barbed wire twisted across the ground like skeletal fingers. I tested each board, each mound of mud, each uncertain step. One wrong move and I would be trapped, exposed, or dead. The order in my pocket pressed against my chest like a stone. Delivering it meant obeying command. Obeying it could mean death. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. My mind had begun to betray me. Shadows shifted in the periphery, forming shapes that were almost human. Voices called my name, whispered warnings, promises, insults. Sometimes they were her voice, soft, accusing, sometimes my friends, cold and indifferent. I answered aloud, sometimes pleading, sometimes shouting, sometimes silent. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The rhythm was my tether to sanity, however frayed it had become. I remembered the trenches I had left behind, the men I had joked with, cursed with, trusted. Their faces had blurred into memory, their names lost to the mud and chaos. One man had pressed a small token into my hand before I left. A locket, a photograph, a fragment of life I could not carry with me. I had buried it in the mud to survive. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. A flare burst overhead, casting stark light across the field. I froze, pressed into the earth, eyes scanning. Craters gaped like open mouths, barbed wire twisted like claws, bodies frozen mid-motion. The sniper was patient. He was everywhere. I could feel his presence in the vibration of the mud, in the wind, in the rhythm of my heartbeat. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Hunger had become a dull ache. Cold gnawed at my fingers, toes, nose, back. Fatigue pressed into my joints, my shoulders, my eyes. Yet I moved. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Each breath was victory. Each motion, survival. Nothing else mattered. I stumbled into another crater, mud up to my waist, water seeping through, chilling me to the bone. I pressed against the side, rifle across my chest, trying not to think of the men who had died here before me. Faces no longer mattered, only movement mattered. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I thought of the letters again, the cold, precise words in my pocket. Deliver, survive if possible, obey. The message was meaningless, but I carried it anyway, as if its weight justified my existence. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Hallucinations grew stronger. I saw figures beyond the craters, moving toward me. Comrades, enemies, ghosts. My imagination blurred the line. I spoke to them, pleaded, argued, cursed. My voice echoed in the night, in the mud, across the destroyed landscape. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The wind carried distant screams, far-off artillery, the crackle of gunfire. I swallowed bile and pressed forward. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I clung to the rhythm, my only proof that I was still alive. I reached a shell hole filled with stagnant water. Peering in, I glimpsed my reflection. Distorted, pale, hollow. The eyes staring back were not mine. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The order in my pocket burned against my chest. Delivering it could change nothing, yet I could not abandon it. Obedience and survival had merged into a single necessity. A sudden crack, sniper fire. The mud sprayed around me, bullets thudding into frozen earth. I pressed myself deeper, heart hammering, lungs screaming. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I whispered, I will survive. Even saying it felt hollow, absurd, yet it anchored me. By the fourth night, time had lost all meaning. Each movement, each breath, each heartbeat was repetition. Survival distilled to its essence. Shadows, voices, hallucinations pressed close, mocking, accusing. I was alone, yet surrounded. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I remembered the friend who had survived elsewhere, indifferent. Rage had no space in me anymore. Only rhythm, only survival, only breath. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. A flare burst, illuminating the ground. Craters, bodies, wire, mud stretched endlessly. I paused, pressed into the earth. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I whispered, I am alive. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The mud swallowed me deeper now. It clung to every inch of me, cold, heavy, relentless. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, muscles screaming with each slow, agonizing step. The letters in my pocket burned against my chest, heavier than my rifle, heavier than the fear that pressed into my skull. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Each breath was a victory, each movement a fragile assertion that I still existed. The flares above cut the sky in sharp white streaks, revealing craters filled with stagnant water, twisted barbed wire, and bodies frozen mid-motion. Some were soldiers, some shadows of memory, some hallucinations. By now I could not tell. I pressed myself into the mud at the edge of a crater, heart hammering, chest heaving. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The sniper was everywhere. I felt him in the vibration of the earth, the crackle of distant artillery, the whisper of wind. I no longer imagined he had a face. He was inevitability, a law, a presence that existed to remind me that survival was never guaranteed. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Hunger gnawed endlessly. Cold bit deeper than pain. My hands had become numb, my fingers stiff. Fatigue pressed like a weight on my shoulders, but I forced myself onward. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I no longer counted time, only steps, breaths, heartbeats. Hallucinations had grown insistent. Shadows moved like men, voices whispered, sometimes her voice, sometimes the friend who had survived elsewhere, indifferent. I argued with them, pleaded, cursed, laughed quietly to keep myself tethered. My voice echoed across the field, swallowed by darkness and mud. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I came to a large shell crater. Water sloshed inside. I looked down at my reflection, or what I thought was mine. A hollow-eyed man stared back. I pressed my fingers to my face, mud and cold mixing with blood and sweat. Was this still me? Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The order burned against my chest, and I knew that obedience could save nothing, yet I could not abandon it. A sudden crack rang out. A bullet hit mud near my shoulder. I pressed myself lower. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The sniper was patient, relentless, unseen, omnipresent. My body trembled, fatigue gnawing at me. I whispered, I will survive, though even saying it felt like a lie. Memories surfaced. Trenches, comrades, laughter, the letters from home. They were fragments, pale and fading. I remembered the friend who had survived elsewhere, indifferent. I could not summon anger. Only survival mattered now. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The mud shifted beneath me. I stumbled, nearly falling. My hands reached for the cold, unyielding earth. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I forced myself onward, over debris, through craters, under wire. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The rhythm was life. The rhythm was all I had. Another flare illuminated the field. Bodies, craters, wire stretched endlessly. Shadows danced. I saw men moving in the distance, friend or hallucination. I could not tell. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I whispered her name. Silence. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. By the fifth night, I had lost track of self. I was movement, breath, pulse, shadow. Faces and names were meaningless. Only the order, the mud, the sniper, and the rhythm existed. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. A distant shell exploded, shaking the ground, spraying mud. I pressed myself further into a crater, lungs burning, body trembling. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I whispered, I am alive. But even that felt fragile, temporary. I remembered the letters once more. They pressed against my chest, fragments of a world that had ceased to exist. Delivering them could accomplish nothing. Command valued obedience over life. I could feel the truth of that in every heartbeat, every breath, every step. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The wind howled, carrying the scent of wet earth, gunpowder, and death. I pressed forward, each movement a negotiation with the mud, the craters, the sniper, the hallucinations. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Survival had become instinct, rhythm, obsession. I reached a narrow passage between craters. Barbed wire clawed at me. Mud threatened to swallow me. I paused, shivering, listening. The sniper was close, or perhaps imagined. I whispered, "It does not matter." Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I forced my legs to obey. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I stumbled into another shell crater. Mud to my waist. Water seeping in, chilling me to the bone. I pressed against the side, rifle across my chest. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Hallucinations pressed closer. Voices shouted, accused, commanded. I argued, pleaded, cursed. My voice carried across the field, swallowed by the emptiness. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The letters burned again. I remembered the faces of men I had trusted. Some dead, some indifferent, some ghosts. Obedience and survival had merged into a single necessity. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I stumbled forward, every motion agony, every breath precious. The sniper, the mud, the field, the orders, they pressed in from all sides. I existed only in movement, only in rhythm, only in survival. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Body numb except for the constant ache of exertion. Yet I moved because not moving meant death. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The sniper was everywhere now, or so my mind told me. I could feel him in the quiver of each shell crater, in the whispering wind, in the vibration of the earth under my knees. Every shadow could hide a gun, a blade, a threat. I had stopped thinking of him as a man. He was inevitability, a law that reminded me how thin the line between life and death had become. I stumbled into a crater filled with icy water. My uniform was soaked through, mud and rain clinging to me in heavy sheets. I pressed my chest to the earth, trying to warm myself, trying to breathe without panicking. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The rhythm alone tethered me to life. The letters in my breast pocket burned against my chest. I knew their message meant nothing. Command cared nothing for life, only obedience. Delivering them might save nothing, might change nothing, yet I carried them anyway. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Every breath, a fragile claim to existence. A flare illuminated the field. Barbed wire stretched like twisted skeletal fingers. Craters gaped like open mouths. The shapes of men, dead or imagined, lay scattered in frozen tableau. Shadows shifted in impossible ways. I whispered aloud, "I am still alive." My voice was strange to me, hollow, yet it anchored me. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I stumbled forward. Mud clung to my legs, sucking at each step. I almost fell. I cursed under my breath and pressed onward, forcing muscles to obey. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. Hunger gnawed relentlessly. Cold bit deeper than pain. Fatigue pressed like a weight across my shoulders. Yet I moved. Hallucinations were constant. I saw men moving at the edges of craters, faces familiar and twisted, voices calling, accusing, pleading. Some were her voice. Some were my friend, indifferent. I spoke aloud, argued, cursed, begged. My voice carried across the shattered landscape, swallowed by emptiness. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The rhythm was survival. I reached another trench, the edge of enemy earth. Barbed wire lay across the mud, deadly and unyielding. My legs trembled under me. My hands were numb, my body screaming. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I pressed on. The letters burned against my chest. I remembered the men I had left behind, their faces, their voices, their laughter. Obedience and survival had merged into one act: move, deliver, live, or die. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. A crack of fire, close now. Mud sprayed around me as a bullet struck earth inches from my shoulder. I pressed myself deeper into the frozen mud, lungs screaming, heart hammering. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I whispered, "I will survive," though I could not be certain it was true. I reached the final stretch of no man's land, barbed wire everywhere, craters like moonscapes, corpses frozen in mud. The sniper's presence was relentless. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I clung to the rhythm. My legs burned. My fingers were numb. My chest ached. Yet I moved. I saw the enemy trench just ahead, the goal, the end. I could almost hear the men waiting for the orders I carried. I imagined their faces. Would they be grateful? Would they be dead already? Could it matter? Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I pressed forward. One step, another, step, pause, sweep, breathe. The sniper fired. I felt mud spray across me. My legs buckled. I pressed myself down, chest to earth. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I reached the trench, the letters. I could almost hand them over. My arms trembled. My body felt like it belonged to someone else, a stranger formed of mud, blood, exhaustion, and fear. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I pressed the letters into the hands of the first soldier I saw, blurred, indistinct, faceless. They took them silently. I did not ask questions. I did not speak. I could not trust words. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I lay there, mud covering me, breathing shallow, body trembling. The sniper was gone, or perhaps I imagined it. The field of death behind me, the trench ahead, orders delivered yet meaningless. My mind felt fractured, hollowed, diminished. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. The wind whispered, shadows moved, the letters burned against my chest even as I had handed them over. I had survived the crossing, yet survival felt empty, absurd, meaningless. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I existed only as motion, breath, shadow, and rhythm. I pressed myself into the mud and closed my eyes. I could not return to who I was. I could not remember it clearly. The battlefield had taken more than life. It had stolen identity, hope, certainty. I was mud, shadow, cold, and exhaustion. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. A flare illuminated the field one last time. Craters, barbed wire, corpses, shadows, nothing beyond. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I whispered, "I am here. I exist. I survive." But even survival had no promise beyond this moment. The sniper, the mud, the night, the orders, they persisted. I waited. I breathed. I survived. But nothing had been saved. Not life, not honor, not hope. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. And in that frozen, black, silent expanse of no man's land, I understood that survival alone was not enough. I had crossed, yet the war had already claimed me. Step, pause, sweep, breathe. I waited.